You know, the protests that took place over the weekend, the incredible double standards that apparently the cause you associate yourself with will apparently beat the virus better than social distancing. Well, that's been made very clear. And there have been proud Indigenous leaders who are willing to speak with a different voice to say they don't agree with what happened. Dr Anthony Dillon works with the Australian Catholic University, and he wrote a piece for news.com.au where he referred to many of these people as being, frankly, a renter crowd. He said that what we are seeing now is just ridiculous. If this was a comedy show, I'd be laughing. But the antics of activists, social justice warriors and their renter crowds only move Australia backwards. These professional protesters are latching onto the Aboriginal deaths in custody issue to enable them to justify their confected outrage and to go out and march with the protest signs saying Black Lives Matter. The outrage from protesters for deaths in custody is about as authentic as the Australia Day protests. I and others have been asking for a long time, where is the outrage about the high rates of violence and child abuse in Aboriginal communities? Dr Anthony Dillon joins us now from Sydney. Lovely to see you, mate. We'll get to the abuse in a second, but let's get back to what you were thinking about these protests and as they were taking place. Why do you think they were a renter crowd?
Okay, first of all, I'm not a leader, not an Indigenous leader, so just commentator, you know.
Okay.
Renter crowd because the majority of people wouldn't have really known what the real issues are facing Aboriginal people. They were just there, you know, they've latched on to what's happened in the States, which is a tragic thing, and obviously there needs to be a response to that. But when we see crowds as big as this, and they try and put it in the Australian context, they're fighting the wrong fight.
What's the fight they should be into?
The things we know. You know, if they're going to talk about black lives, let's talk about all black lives that have died, including the many that have died at the hands of other Aboriginal people. And we all know that, you know, the violence rates are horrific. So in addition to that, you know, child welfare, all those sorts of things to give Aboriginal kids and families the best start.
Now, there were 23,000 child protection orders which had been given by Territory families to try to take care of kids in the Northern Territory. The extreme majority of those are in remote Indigenous communities. We spoke to Jacinta Price about this last night. The entire population of the Northern Territory is 250,000 people. We know that the horrors that are happening in remote and regional Australia, where babies are born with syphilis, where horrific things take place, that many of the people, if they decided to do something, 100,000 strong they were around the country, I doubt many of them have even been to regional Australia, let alone remote regional Australia, and to actually see the disgraceful third world conditions that exist in part because of the paternalism of the people who police this discussion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of these places are like war zones. So, you know, we've got this happening in our own backyard. We don't have to go to America to feel outraged. We can feel outraged about this sort of thing that's going on in our own backyard.
So how does it work when you have these people who are so heavily invested in a slice of this conversation, maximum effort, maximum rage, but then so little interest in anything outside of that? And there are certain political leaders who were out there with the black tiles on Twitter or saying Black Lives Matter, who, when they were in a position of power, they heard about stories like, you know, the rape of the 2-year-old girl, and then Malcolm Turnbull didn't go to Tennant Creek for months after that, and even then the whole thing was a flying whistle visit of a couple of hours. Yet Tony Abbott, who tried to move the entire federal government and the federal media to at the very least physically go and see something, he's of course pilloried until the day he dies. And it seems that it's not the issue, it's about who's allowed to talk about the issue. And I'll get to the abuse in a second, but when people like yourself or Jacinta Price or Warren Mundine speak about the rest of that issue, you get your head torn off.
Absolutely. You know, you're seen as a traitor, sellout, coconut, all that sort of thing. And we're not talking about these things to rubbish Aboriginal people. We're talking about these things because we want to see these bad things eliminated, and we want to see them prosper. And we want to see these people in, you know, the worst situations have the sort of lives just like these protesters. And I bet every one of those protesters knows where their next meal's coming from, and they would have had a safe home to live in, to sleep in that night. And that's what we want for Aboriginal people in the remote areas where they're suffering badly.
Now, just a taste of the garbage that you had to cop about the article that you put up, that was out there yesterday. There's this Sheila who's an Aboriginal academic from UQ, Dr Charlene Leroy Dyer. This is what she wrote to you on Twitter, and I'm sorry to repeat this to you, but here we go. Shame on you. What kind of blackfella are you anyway? Coconut, i.e. black on the outside, white on the inside. This is a person paid by the Queensland taxpayer, New South Wales, the Australian taxpayer to work at UQ. That's a picture of her, and she refers to herself as a union thug, a troublemaker, a feminist, left-wing political views, loves travel, makes Aboriginal jewellery. My views are my own. To be called a coconut, I mean, I'm sorry to even repeat the slur at you, but I can't think of anything more offensive when all you're doing is saying there's something more important than the thing you are taking the streets for is a disgrace. How did you feel when you saw that today?
Oh, look, on a personal level, those sorts of insults don't worry me. They're a badge of honour. They are just tactics to silence a person. You know, opinions from people like her really don't worry me that much. Like I said, it's their way of saying, I don't want to discuss this. As Einstein said, the ears won't hear what the heart can't accept. And for them, these conversations like the ones you and I are having right now, they do not want to know about them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was going to show some of the abuse that Jacinta had copped, but it is literally too foul to show on air. And then I'd literally be rubbing out, 4 of the 6 words in a particular tweet. They're horrific here. But again, right, I don't know how many times you get invited onto Radio National or get invited onto ABC discussions, but I'm imagining it's going to be a whole lot less than somebody who wants to deliver the view that reinforces that it's all about Aboriginal deaths in custody. It's not about the family life that produces the people who end up having to interact with police fairly or unfairly.
Absolutely. I caught a glimpse of the drum tonight and, listening to what people are saying, you just know what the dialogue, what the narrative is going to be. So, that's why I'm grateful for opportunities like this to voice my opinion and concern, just the way Jacinta is. It's good for us.
Well, you're always going to be welcome here. I'm going to have longer chats, more of them. So anytime you've got something you want to say, get in touch and we'll obviously give you a platform here because last time I checked, it is across the entire country and there's lots of people watching. Good on you, Anthony.
Thank you, Paul.
Good on you, mate. Dr Anthony Dillon there. He is a lecturer at the Australian Catholic University. He's a commentator on Indigenous issues.